Thanks for tuning in at Brackies.
Hello everyone and welcome to the third video on making a quiz game in Unity. Today we are going to be tying together some of our code with the actual interface in Unity so to be displaying questions and maybe doing some animation stuff. So that's going to be a lot of fun. If you think that I sound a bit weird, that's because I still am a little bit sick. So as always, that's why. Good, so let's just jump into today's video. So you can see here that I'm in Unity and I haven't changed anything since the last time I was here. And the first thing that I want to be doing is actually changing this question placeholder here. So if we jump into our game manager script, let's go ahead and make a reference to that and make sure that we change that whenever we load in a new question. So you can see here that I'm in Visual Studio and we have this function here that gets a random question. And we are just going to remove this debug.log statement. And I want to rename this into, instead of get random question, so I wanted to say set current question. I think that makes a bit more sense for what we're doing. And inside of this, what I want to do is, this is where I want to access our current question dot fact. And that is the actual text that we want to display. And where do we want to put this? Well, we want to put this into a private reference. So I'm going to make a serialize field here, private, to make it show up in the inspector. Make it a private, and then we'll do a text object. And whenever we want to use Unity's text from the new GUI system, or relatively new, we need to include Unity Engine UI up here. So that's part of the UI namespace. So we have a private text and we'll simply call this the question text or the fact text. And we can just close that off. And then down here we can say that fact text.text needs to be equal to the current question.fact. And when we save this, head back into Unity, find our game manager. We should see a new field pop up here. Indeed we do. And I'm just going to close off the questions array there. And we can just take under the question panel and the question here. We can simply drag that onto there. And let's just, instead of question, let's call this fact, just so we are using the same terminology throughout. And let's try and hit play here. And you can see that now that states something that is very obviously very true. So the next thing that we need to do is kind of make this interactive. So we need some kind of win or lose statement. And therefore we need to hook up these two true and false buttons. So let's make a couple of public methods that will do this for us. So first off, we'll make a public. I need to move my keyboard closer here so I can actually hit the buttons. There we go. A public void. And this is going to be the user select true. And in here, we will simply say that if, and then if our current question dot is true, well, then we have selected the correct answer. Then we can write out debug.log correct. Else, meaning if we have selected true and the current question is not true, then we can write out that we were wrong. So we can write out wrong here. There we go. And we will duplicate this piece of code down here and make this user select false. And if you have multiple answers, if it's not just a true or false, you can make this into a single method that has an integer stating what the user has selected, or an enum or whatever. So you can use an argument instead of just copy pasting this method. But whenever we just have boolean true or false, this is going to work just fine. So user select false, and we can say here that if current question dot is not true, then we want to write out that that was correct. So if we've selected false and it was false, then we were correct, and it was true, then we were wrong. Perfect. So now we can just save that, head back into Unity. And now we can link these methods up with our actual buttons. So if we go ahead and find our true button here, for example, we can start with that and find the actual button layer. Then on click here, we have the possibility to add an event. So we'll go ahead and hit plus on that. We'll take our game manager and drag it in. And the function that we want to access under our game manager is user select true. We can do the same with our false button. So find the button layer, add a new onClick event, drag in our game manager. And here on the game manager, we want to select user select false. Good. So now we can hit play here. And I am super cool. That is indeed true. And you can see it says correct. If we then choose false, you can see it says wrong. So that's perfect. So the next thing that we need is both a way for this to be displayed on the UI, but we also need a way to transition to the next question. So let's begin with that. So let's make a method that will transition to the next question, but it will do so after a certain amount of seconds. We need some kind of delay so that the user can see, oh, I was correct or I was wrong, and then it will transition so that we have kind of a little bit of time to understand what went down. Good. So in order to do this, let's start by making some kind of serialize field. And this is going to be a private float, and it's going to store the delay. So delay, or maybe time between questions. And we are going to set that to, let's just say, 1 second by default. And we can always tweak this later. Then we are going to make a new enumerator, and this is where we are going to be using system.collections. So we'll just make one, let's say here, a enumerator. And this one is going to be called transition to next question. And what we are first going to do is I want to take this unanswered questions.remove add. I would kind of like to maybe move that down here. But then again, it's fine that we're just doing it with the random index, but no, I want to move it down here so that we are actually removing this whenever we have answered something. I think that's a better way. And instead of using remove add, we are going to use remove. And then instead of inserting an index, we are going to insert the current question. So it will remove by an element, not by an index. Then what we can do is we can wait a certain amount of seconds. So yield, return, new, wait 4 seconds. And if you've never worked with enumerators and maybe you're not so advanced in C# programming, just right after me here. An enumerator, if we were to understand this very simply, allows us to wait a certain amount of seconds inside of the method before something new happens. And you do that by typing yield, return, new, wait for seconds, and then giving that the amount of seconds to wait. And the amount of seconds that we want to wait is the time between questions. There we go. So just right after me, you don't need to understand why this works, it just does. And then what we want to do is, of course, set a new current question. So we're going to say, actually, instead of doing that, let's just reload the entire scene. So let's go ahead and go and find our, and this, yeah, okay, so when we need to reload the scene, we need to also import scene management. So using scene, Unity engine dot scene management. There we go. And now we can access our scene manager down here, and we can tell it to load a scene. And the scene that we wanted to load is the current scene. And we can get the index or the name of our current scene by saying scene manager dot get active scene. There we go. And then we need to either use a build index or name. We're just going to use the build index, so we'll say dot build index. So we will load the scene with the index of our current scene. That is kind of the idea here. And that means that it will just restart. So that's going to work just fine. And the only thing that we need to do now is make sure that we transition to the new question after having selected something. So let's do that under the user selects true. Then we want to call that. And whenever we are working with our enumerators, we don't just call them like this. We use start coroutine, and then we specify the enumerator routine. And in this case, we want to load in or start the transition to next question. There we go. And we need to do the same thing down here. Good, so now that we've saved this, we can head back into Unity. And we should see now that when we hit play, and 2 plus 2 equals 4, that's true, so I'm going to select true. It says correct, it waits 1 second, and then it loads in the next question. And that's perfect. Violets are red, that's false, and it says correct, and it loads in the new question. And you can see if I answer wrong to a question, false, wrong, and it loads in. And then, okay, so maybe it loaded in the same question here. And that's fine, that's because we only have 3 questions. And when it's done with all of the different questions, it simply loops again. And that means that if we go under our debug here and look under our current question, no, that wasn't what I wanted to see. Maybe we cannot inspect this. Actually, we can't. What I wanted to show you here is that the unanswered questions array was reset, and then it selected a new one in the unanswered questions array, and that's why the same one appeared. So you can see if I answer wrong here again, it shows me a new one. And that's simply because of the way we have it set up. This is not a real issue if you have plenty of questions in the array, but since I only have 3, this might happen at times. So just make sure to make plenty of questions. If this behavior really annoys you, you can go in and tell it make some kind of if that stores some kind of temporary variable that stores the previous question that was loaded. And what you can then do is simply check if that was equal to the same, and if it is, then load a new one. But I don't think that that's really necessary here. Cool, so this is actually working. However, our game itself is actually pretty lame because we're not really showing what's going on. So let's, instead of using these debug.log statements, do some actual animations. So let's find our canvas here and let's add a component to this. And that's actually, it will add this automatically. Let's just instead go ahead and find our window and then animation, and let's drag it down here. Let's go ahead and create a new animation clip. Create. And let's make this let's make a folder for this first of all. This is just going to be animation. And under that, let's go ahead and make this clip. And this is going to be a true answer. So in case we've selected the true one, what I want to do is I want to have this false button slide out of the picture so that we can see that it was the true one we selected. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to reveal whether or not this was correct behind this button. So in order to do this, let's make 2 text objects, one for the true and one for the false. Okay, so let's go ahead and make 2 text objects. And in order to do this, let's just maybe copy the text from our question panel here. And let's just scale this somewhat the same size as the buttons maybe. I don't know quite how we want to scale this yet. So they are like that. And their anchor points goes there. Okay, so that's fine. So what we can do is maybe scale this like that and that. And put this in the middle. There we go. And what we can then do is maybe just temporarily disable the true button here and change the text here to maybe correct. And we can scale this up a bit. 50 is pretty cool. We can maybe even make this a bold text. And instead of doing that under there, let's find the actual bold font. So let's find the Roboto bold. There we go. Oh, that's the italic version. There's the non-italic one. So it says correct there. I actually think that bold is might be a bit too much. Let's do the medium one instead. There we go. So it tells you that that was correct or wrong, whatever. And everything else looks pretty nice here. So let's just make this the, and this is then the false answer, because this will be shown if we click false, the then the true button will slide out and it will reveal whether or not this was correct or wrong. Good. So we'll just keep that, and then let's make sure that this stretches correctly. Whoops. Find our false answer and drag in the anchor points. There we go. So now this will stretch correctly with the screen. And that's perfect. Good. Now that we have that in place, let's do the same with the true button. So let's now disable the false button and enable the true button. And you can see that it covers it up. Then we can take the false answer and duplicate it. And we can then move it over here. Now that we have, move it over here. And are they lining up? Indeed they are. And we can now make this maybe, correct is fine, the text there is fine, but this is then the true answer. And we also need to move the anchor point. So this one goes all the way over there, and this one goes over there. And I could see that I just had messed this up a tiny bit. There we go. And we also want this to be at the back of these buttons so that they overlay. So now you can see that when I enable the buttons, it's fine. If I then select, let's say true, and disable this, it will show whether or not that was correct. Now we simply need to, first of all, link this to the animation and also have the script change this. So let's first off head into Visual Studio, and let's just make two references to this, just like we did the fact text. So let's do serialize field. And this is the private text, and we call this true answer text. We'll do that. And another serialized field. Oops. Another serialized field, and this is the private text false answer text. Perfect. Let's save that. Then when we set the current question, when we load all of this in, what we want to do is we want to set that if current question dot is true, so if it is actually true, then we want to set answer or true answer text dot text to correct. And then we want to set false answer text dot text equal to false. Else, meaning if the current question is not true, then we want to set true answer text dot text equal to false, or wrong. I mean, wrong is the correct terminology here. And the false answer text dot text equal to correct. So, and it's fine that we are setting it in here because it's covered up by the buttons, and so the user won't be able to see that. And that's good because then we only need to have this code in one place. So now what we should see, if we link up these texts here, so the true answer text, and the false answer on the false answer text, is that when we hit play and maybe disable these, you can say that if we select true, this is correct. And if we select false, this is wrong. So that's perfect. And you will see this come to life when we do the animations, which we're going to do right now. So let's select the canvas here, go under record, and let's select our, so this is when we select our true answer. So that means that we will need to move over our false button. And we do this by simply keyframing the position of the false button. So what we can do is simply we can simply move this out. There we go, simply out there, just outside the screen, maybe just a bit further. And you can see here that I'm not doing the actual movement. I'm simply making a single keyframe. And that's because Unity will blend between the animation states itself. And therefore, we only need to have these stationary states, and it will do the fading on its own. And that's going to look just fine. Then we'll also have another clip here. And this is also going to go under animation. And it's not going to say true answer. This is going to say false answer. And this is going to do the exact opposite. It's going to take our true button and then move that out of the way. Something like that. And now that we have these two states, the true answer and the false answer, and just for good order's sake, we'll go ahead and create a separate state here, which is the no answer state or unanswered state. And we can just save this. And then if we record this, what I want to do is I want to simply keyframe. I want to keyframe the stationary positions of our false buttons. And this might be a bit overkill. You really might not need to do this since we are loading in the frame and stuff like that, or reloading the scene, but just for good order's sake, we are going to set them there in the no answer state. Good. So what we can then do is we can find our project panel here. We can go under animation and you can see that we have a canvas animation or animator here. And we're just going to call this the let's say game animator. And we can open this up. So if we double click this, it will open it up in the animator editor. And what we need to do here is we want to set our no answer state to the default state. So let's just right click and set as layer default state. So right when we load in the game, this is what it's going to be playing, which is nothing. And then we make a transition to the true answer and to the false answer. And we go in here and we say that we don't want this to have exit time. And we don't want this either to have exit time. So this way it will transition as soon as it's triggered and not wait for this to play. That wouldn't make any sense. And then we give it some parameters. So we go under parameters here and we add two triggers. The first one is true and the second one is false. And if we have true here, we add a condition here. So the condition is true, then we transition to the true answer. And the condition here is false. Then we can transfer to the, or then we transition to the false answer. So now you can see that if I hit play here and select true, it says correct. If I do this again, and whoops, I didn't turn it off there. If I do this again and maybe select false, it says correct now because violets are not red. Cool. So that's how it works. And now we simply need to reference this and trigger it inside of our script. And that is super easy. All we need to do is go into our game manager and add a reference to our animator. And we'll just call this one animator. And just going to write private there because I like to do that. And then under our user select true, all we do is we say animator, or with small letters now, dot set trigger, and we simply say true. Or I did that, not capital, there we go. And you can of course make this into a variable up there if you want to be able to change that, but I'm just going to hard code it in because I imagine you know how to do that. And down here we're going to do the same but with false. And now if we save that, our game should actually be done. So if we hit play here, you can see it says I'm super cool. We select true. And we have an unassigned reference here. So we need to drag in the animator then that sits on the canvas. Let's try that again. Hit play. Violets are red. That's false. And it says correct. I'm super cool. That's true. It says correct. 2 plus 2 equals 4. Let's try and answer wrong here. So false. And that's wrong. So there we go. Now we have provided the user with feedback on what he's doing. And you can see there our error was there again, but that's fine. So you can now just play all of this all the time. And that's perfect. Cool. So the way that we are handling the looping of the questions here is maybe a bit simple, and you can definitely do other ways to do this. You can also just make an end screen when the user has answered all the questions. It's always difficult to find out what to do when you don't have any more questions. The simple solution is just make a lot of questions. And I definitely recommend that you play around with stuff like a score counter and a cool end screen. Make some kind of menu as well. All that stuff you can take from other series on the channel, and I definitely recommend that you experience or that you play around with this. I think I will make one short video in this series to wrap it up, where we will maybe build some kind of an icon and build this out so I can show you different ways of sharing the game. But that is actually all I wanted to put in the game. So I hope that you enjoyed this course, and I will see you in the next and final video.